Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Friday, April 4th, 2025. All right, first thing, one more reminder about the fundraiser. This should be the last time I am bothering you about this until our next fundraiser. But we're trying to finish up in these next couple days, finish up this weekend. Antiwar.com is 100% reader funded. This is how we get by. I appreciate everyone who's pitched in so far. I've heard from a lot of people who said they've donated. I really appreciate it. That's how we're able to do what we do. That's how I'm able to do this show. And your money is spent very efficiently. It goes to paying this very small staff that we have and paying some of our contributors and just keeping the lights on, paying the bills and things like that. So please, if you have the means and you haven't done so already, go to antiwar.com/donate and see the different ways that you can support us. Again, I appreciate everyone who helped us with this fundraiser. All right, so the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Hamas is ready to free all hostages for a permanent truce. So Hamas is ready to release all remaining Israeli hostages in Gaza at once in exchange for a permanent ceasefire. This was reported by the Times of Israel on Thursday, citing a senior Palestinian official. The report said that Israel has had a long-standing rejection of this kind of deal, and that's why Hamas recently proposed that it could release 5 hostages to renew a temporary ceasefire. However, Hamas also wanted a guarantee that Israel would commit to entering negotiations on reaching a permanent truce, which Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has refused to do. So again, this is from the Israeli media report saying that Israel has had a long-standing rejection to a kind of deal where Hamas would release all the hostages at once for a permanent ceasefire. And tell that to all the people who respond to pictures and videos of dead Palestinian kids who say, just release the hostages. Well, apparently Hamas has been offering to do just that. And Israel countered, and, this isn't really a new thing. We've known that Hamas's position, they've been saying that they want to implement the full ceasefire deal that was signed in January. And if that was implemented all the way, it would have led to the release of all the Israeli hostages in exchange for a permanent ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal. But this is saying that Hamas is ready to do it all at once, release all the hostages in exchange for the permanent truce. So, again, because Israel refused, Hamas recently did propose extending the temporary ceasefire. They would release 5 hostages, but they wanted a guarantee that Israel would enter the negotiations for the permanent ceasefire. And Israel countered Hamas's offer with a proposal for Hamas to release 11 hostages for a temporary ceasefire that did not include a commitment to negotiate a permanent end. The senior Palestinian official speaking to the Times said that after the Israeli counterproposal, negotiations are at a standstill. The Palestinian official said, quote, "The number of hostages is not the issue. If Israel demonstrates its intention to reach a permanent ceasefire, Hamas is prepared to release all of the hostages. Israel only wants a partial agreement so that it can continue fighting. It wants Hamas to give up all the hostages without entering the second phase," end quote. So under that ceasefire deal signed in January, the second phase would have involved the permanent ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. So as we've seen from comments from Netanyahu and Katz, Israeli officials they're not only demanding Hamas release the hostages, they're also demanding that Hamas disarm and that its leaders leave Gaza. The senior Palestinian official said that Hamas was willing to cede control of Gaza to other Palestinians as part of a deal, but that it would never disarm before the creation of a Palestinian state. The official said that President Trump is the only person capable of ending Israel's genocidal campaign on Gaza, but that he has decided to, quote, "give Netanyahu a green light to open the gates of hell on Gaza," end quote. So the next one here is a really bloody day in Gaza on Thursday, really horrific. The next story, Israeli strikes on Gaza kill more than 100 in a single day. And just a warning, there's a very graphic video in here. So U.S.-backed Israeli attacks on Gaza on Thursday killed more than 100 Palestinians, medical sources told Al Jazeera, as relentless strikes pounded areas across the Strip. Attacks on Thursday included the bombing of a school turned shelter for displaced Palestinian civilians in Gaza City. According to the Anadolu Agency, at least 29 people were killed in the strike, and footage of the aftermath of the attack shows dead and wounded children. And so I started putting in these videos because we have an account with Reuters. We get their photos and videos and all the news agencies that they partner with, which is a lot. So it's a lot of stuff that we have access to. And I was always putting pictures in and kind of stupidly not really looking at the videos. But recently, I mean, there's just all this footage from, as I had yesterday, from the hospitals. I mean, today, picking out what to put in the story, I chose this one because, I was covering the strike on this school. But I mean, the videos, I mean, there was just so many of them that were just absolutely horrific. It's just scenes from hospitals, from inside hospitals of dead and children covered in blood and wounded children. And then these videos of ambulances pulling up to hospitals, bringing dead Palestinians out, it's just absolutely, I don't even know the word for how, I always say, oh, it's horrific, but I don't even know, I try to think of other ways to describe it, but it's just like, it's really tough to watch this stuff, and it just has more of an impact than the pictures. So I'll just skim through a little bit of this for the people watching. It's really graphic stuff, but so this is the aftermath of the strike on the school. The first thing there was a dead child, and there's more of that. And you see this is the school. The fire here, they're trying to put it out. Man, it's just horrific. And you see them pull some people out of the rubble. So Gaza's government media office said the dead included 18 children, women, and elderly people, and more than 100 were wounded. The media office said, quote, "The occupation has committed a new massacre against displaced persons by bombing Dar al-Arqam school in Gaza City," end quote. So other Israeli attacks on Thursday included the bombing of al-Mawasi, a tent camp that the Israeli military just ordered Palestinians in Rafah to flee to. Eyewitnesses told Middle East Eye that an Israeli strike targeted a building surrounded by tents in al-Mawasi in the middle of the night, killing at least 7 people, including women and children. The day of ramped-up Israeli attacks came after Israeli officials announced the Israeli military would be expanding its ground assault to seize more territory in southern Gaza, although Thursday's strikes were very heavy in northern Gaza, with 58 reported killed in Gaza City. The IDF is also conducting a ground assault on eastern Gaza City. Gaza's health ministry said on Thursday that since Israel restarted its genocidal war on March 18th, which it did with full U.S. support, that at least 1,163 Palestinians have been killed and 2,735 have been wounded. And it's just been an absolute bloodbath every single day since then. Our government has been helping Israel kill all these people, kill all these children. I mean, again, you look at these pictures and videos, it's tough. All right, so the next one here, 17-year-old Palestinian prisoner starved to death by Israeli guards. So this article's from Defense for Children International Palestine, and I covered the other day the 17-year-old Palestinian who was thrown in jail by Israeli forces on no charges, died in prison. And the autopsy report for him indicates that he likely died from a combination of starvation, dehydration, from colitis-induced diarrhea, and infectious complications, all compounded by prolonged malnutrition and denial of life-saving medical intervention. Walid Khalid Abdullah Ahmad, 17, died while held in Israeli custody in Megiddo prison in northern Israel on the morning of March 22nd after collapsing in the prison yard. And he suffered from extreme body, muscle, and fat wasting, evidenced by sunken abdomen, according to a doctor who attended the autopsy on behalf of Walid's family. Walid also had scabies rashes on both legs and his groin, in addition to abrasions on his nose, chest, and right hip. The examination revealed that Walid had significant air collections in both his chest and abdominal cavities, likely caused by blunt trauma, along with signs of inflammation likely caused by infection. There was also evidence of edema and congestion in his large intestines. consistent with traumatic injury, likely the result of beatings, which are frequently inflicted by Israeli prison guards on Palestinian child detainees. So, 17-year-old kid thrown in jail on no charges, kept in prison, starved, and beaten to death. And just just the lack of attention that this just gets no attention from the U.S. media. And, he's the 63rd Palestinian prisoner to die since October 7th, 2023. And again, it's just something you just don't hear about. That's more than died in Gaza. Israeli hostages died in Gaza in captivity. All right. So the next one here, where are we? Senate blocks effort to stop bombs for Israel. On Thursday, the Senate killed an effort by Senator Bernie Sanders to block $8.8 billion in bombs and other munitions shipments to Israel, a vote that came on the same day Israel killed more than 100 Palestinians, including many children in Gaza. So Sanders introduced two resolutions, one to block a $2.04 billion deal for 35,000 2,000-pound bombs and 4,000 penetrator warheads, and another resolution to block a $6.7 billion shipment of 2,800 500-pound bombs, 2,000 small diameter bombs, and tens of thousands of JDAM guidance kits. So very heavy munitions here that the U.S. is sending Israel. And this failed in a vote of 15 to 83. The two resolutions, one failed 15 to 83, the other failed 15 to 81. So only 14 Democrats joined Bernie Sanders, again, just with these atrocities, just nonstop atrocities that have been happening in Gaza for the past 2 weeks. And only 15 senators could vote to stop sending more bombs to Israel. And Rand Paul did not join Bernie Sanders. He, he has a history of joining the votes or even leading legislation against, weapons shipments to Saudi Arabia, but not Israel. He votes against it when it's Israel. So Sanders, gave a speech on the Senate floor before the vote, just pointing out some of the atrocities and everything. But so I think it's good to get this, to get a vote, to get this on record where these senators stand. But definitely depressing to see that only 15 voted to block these bombs. Again, look at what we're seeing in Gaza every day right now. Only 15 people want to stop it in the Senate. And this is just a few bomb shipments. That doesn't necessarily mean that they want to stop it altogether. All right, so the next one here, Hungary hosts Netanyahu, announces that it will quit the ICC. So on Thursday, Hungary hosted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and announced that it would be quitting the International Criminal Court, which has issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. So Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said, quote, "The Hungarian government has decided to withdraw from the ICC," end quote. And if you see the video, Netanyahu's next to him and he starts clapping as Orban announces that. In a post on X, Orban said that the ICC, quote, "has become a political tribunal, evident in its witch hunt against Prime Minister Netanyahu. We will not support a court that targets democracies like Israel for political gain. Hungary defends the rule of law. Hungary stands with Israel," end quote. Standing with Israel is not defending the rule of law. So the ICC issued its warrants for Netanyahu and former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant back in November 2024. The court also sought warrants for 3 Hamas leaders, but they have all been killed by Israel. Orban has been one of the few European leaders consistently calling for peace in Ukraine. I've appreciated his stance, his government's stance on the war in Ukraine, but he has expressed strong support for Israel amid its genocidal war on Gaza. Netanyahu said, quote, "Hungary stood by Israel in Hamas's murderous attack, and today Hungary stands by Israel in the attack on the hypocrisy of the International Criminal Court in The Hague," end quote. Both the Biden administration and the Trump administration have strongly opposed the ICC's efforts against Netanyahu since the U.S. is implicated in Israeli war crimes due to U.S. military aid and other kinds of support. In February, the Trump administration sanctioned Karim Khan, the British lawyer who serves as the ICC chief prosecutor. All right, so the next one here, thousands expected in D.C. for Palestine March. This article is from Mondo Weiss. So thousands are expected to mobilize in Washington, D.C. this weekend to protest Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza and the Trump administration's crackdown on Palestine activists. So the March on Washington to stop the genocide will mark the largest pro-Palestine protest of the Trump era thus far. Sponsors include Palestinian Youth Movement, the People's Forum, Answer Coalition, American Muslims for Peace, the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations, Jewish Voice for Peace, U.S. Palestinian Community Network, the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, the Palestinian Feminist Collective, AROC Action, the DSA, and Al-Auda. So a lot of organizations, over 200, have endorsed it. So it looks like this will probably be a pretty big protest this weekend. Again, April 5th at 1 p.m. in D.C., so that's this Saturday. All right, so the next one here, the Houthis shoot down another U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone. So Yemeni air defense has shot down a U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone for the second time within 72 hours as the U.S.'s daily bombing campaign has not deterred the Houthis or stopped their attacks. Yemen's Saba news agency reported that the U.S. drone was shot down while it was flying over the Hodeidah province, which has been heavily bombed by the U.S. in recent days. Jennifer Griffin, a reporter for Fox News, confirmed that the U.S. MQ-9 was shot down in a post on X. That's what her sources told her. She's got a lot of sources inside the Pentagon. The Houthis said the incident marked the 17th U.S. MQ-9 that Yemeni forces shot down since October 2023. And Griffin said, she said at least 13 drones were shot down in that time. But she cited a source who said that the real number could be as high as 17. So some confirmation saying at least 13 U.S. drones, and it could be as many as 17, which means that the numbers from the Houthis are correct. So if 17 is right, that means that the U.S. has lost $510 million worth of drones since 2023 to the Houthis. And U.S. airstrikes have continued to pound Yemen every day since the bombing campaign began on March 15th. Overnight, this is overnight Wednesday into Thursday, 36 U.S. strikes were reported in the country. The Trump administration has been claiming that its bombing campaign has been an incredible success, despite failing to stop the Houthis, who are officially known as Ansar Allah, and they've been firing missiles at Israel and claiming attacks on U.S. warships in the region. They've repeatedly stated that the only way they will stop is if there's a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the Israeli blockade on the territory, and they reaffirmed that in their statement about downing the U.S. drone. So when it comes to the Houthi attacks on U.S. warships, they claim attacks. I believe that they are launching these attacks, but we haven't seen a peep from the Pentagon, from U.S. Central Command about these U.S. warships coming under attack, or even saying that they're intercepting missiles and drones in the Red Sea. They're just not sharing any information about either the U.S. attacks on Yemen or the Yemeni attacks on U.S. ships. So we don't, just have not been transparent at all. And so Griffin was complaining about this too. She said, quote, "The U.S. has been striking Houthi targets in Yemen for 20 straight days since the U.S. military operation was launched on March 15th. The Pentagon has not held a briefing for journalists since March 17th, and U.S. Central Command has not been putting out press releases about the operation. When reporters request information from DoD and CENTCOM about the military operation in Yemen, even on background, we are told they cannot answer our questions, which is a break from the past," end quote. So this is probably costing the U.S. billions. I mean, in a few weeks' time, maybe not billions, but firing all these munitions, that costs a lot of money. I mean, besides the immorality of it, of all the civilians being killed and doing this to ensure Israel can continue its genocide in Gaza. It is costing a lot of money, and these are things, you hear from the Trump administration that, they're the most transparent administration in history, yet they launched this new massive bombing campaign, and they're not telling us anything about it. No timeline for how long it's going to last, not saying what the cost is, not saying, are these U.S. Navy sailors in the Red Sea, are they at risk? Nobody knows anything because they're not telling us. All right, so the next one here, I left up the one yesterday about the possibility of Trump bombing Iran. The next one, Israeli attacks on southern Syria kill 11 civilians. This one is from Jason Ditz. After deadly attacks across central Syria on Wednesday killed at least 13 and wounded dozens, Israel seems to be continuing to step up the pace of their aggression in the neighboring country, pounding the southern city of Nawa on Thursday in attacks that have left at least 11 civilians dead so far. The airstrikes and shelling around this area began concurrently with Israeli ground forces moving to take the Al-Jabalia Dam just west of the city. This is reportedly the deepest ground incursion into Syria so far since they invaded in September. There are reports that a lightly armed local militia resisted the ground troops' advancement, though there has so far been no report that the Israeli troops sustained any casualties. I should correct that. He said they started the invasion in September, but it started in December. He probably got Syria and Lebanon confused. The casualties rather seem to have happened not from any clash, but entirely from the airstrikes against Nawa and the shelling of Tel Al-Jumu hilltop near the city. Nawa hospitals reportedly faced with substantial casualties from the attacks, and though an exact number hasn't been released, some are gravely wounded, and the death toll may yet rise further. So very heavy Israeli attacks for 2 days in a row on Syria. And then the next one here, Israeli defense minister says no time limit to the occupation of southern Lebanon. Get these mixed up. So during a visit to the border village, this is another one from Jason. During a visit to the border village of Mar Galiat in Lebanon, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz urged, actually that's on the Israeli side of the border. Sorry, I'm all confused here. So Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz urged northern Israelis to return to their communities by assuring them that Israeli troops would continue to occupy military outposts inside Lebanese territory, insisting that the occupation has no time limit. Large numbers of Israelis fled to the northern parts of the country in the lead up to September's invasion of Lebanon, and many have been resistant to the idea of returning home. The government is pushing the narrative that it's perfectly safe, though not because there have effectively been no rockets successfully fired into Israel during the ceasefire. Rather, the government is pushing the idea that their occupation of southern Lebanon is open-ended, so it's safe in that respect. Local political figures may be adding to the resistance toward returning by condemning the ceasefire and arguing that the invasion should just be continuing outright, saying that they should be pushing further into Lebanon. And we've seen Israeli attacks on Beirut recently. So, I mean, this is there's always this risk of big escalation in Lebanon happening. All right, so the next one here, Putin envoy holds 2 days of talks in U.S. So a Russian economic official who serves as an envoy for Russian President Vladimir Putin visited Washington this week and held 2 days of talks with U.S. officials, which he said went well. So Kirill Dmitriev, the CEO of Russia's Direct Investment Fund, which is the Russian government's sovereign wealth fund, told reporters on Thursday while still in Washington that the talks made progress. He said, quote, "I would say that today and yesterday we made 3 steps forward on a large number of issues," end quote. He said that a major issue impeding U.S.-Russia relations was the lack of communication. Over the past few years, he said, quote, "Therefore, the process of dialogue, the process of resolution will take some time, but it is definitely positive and constructive," end quote. In an interview with CNN, he said that he was not in the U.S. to ask for sanctions relief, but conveyed that Russia was ready to do business with American companies. On Wednesday, he met with Steve Witkoff, who's Trump's Middle East envoy, but he's also involved in the Ukraine stuff. He's met with Putin twice, I believe. This visit comes amid all this uncertainty, these reports that the U.S. doesn't expect a Ukraine peace deal to happen soon, and the both sides accusing the other of breaking the moratorium on striking energy infrastructure. His message when he was in the U.S., Dmitriev, is saying that he thinks it could take a while, but that progress is being made and that a diplomatic solution is possible to end the war. All right, so the next one here, Ukraine is using U.S. tactical vehicles undisclosed by the Pentagon. So this one's from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. A combat unit of NATO-trained Ukrainian soldiers was photographed using a Flyer 72 LD tactical vehicle. The Pentagon did not report that it had transferred the platform to Ukraine, which was previously operated primarily by American Special Forces. The Flyer's presence in Ukraine became public when blogger praised the STEF, posted a photo of the vehicle with soldiers from Kiev's 6th Separate Ranger Regiment. The Flyer is designed to be a lightweight tactical vehicle that can operate in rugged terrain. It can be carried to the front by a number of helicopters and can carry a 5,000-pound load. The Pentagon has not previously disclosed the transfer of the Flyer to Kiev. So this is a sign, and we've seen other weapons here. This has happened before, where like you'll see a weapon system that the U.S. has not announced that it's sent to Ukraine, but it kind of just appears. So there's always the possibility of the U.S. sending more weapons than we're aware of. Even, again, we're talking about this new Trump administration. No transparency about the war in Yemen. Is it possible that they're sending new equipment to Ukraine using some other kind of authorization? I think that's certainly possible. We know that Biden approved enough weapon sales and weapons transfers that it'll take years for them all to be fulfilled. So those shipments are happening. But is there a chance that some other things are happening behind the scenes that we're not aware of? I think certainly is possible. All right, so the next one, the last story here, China puts U.S. military on notice over dangerous activities. So this one is from the South China Morning Post. More about tensions between the U.S. and China. So the People's Liberation Army will respond to any dangerous provocations by the U.S. military in the waters and airspace near China, the Chinese Navy said on Thursday after a bilateral maritime security meeting in Shanghai. So the Chinese and U.S. officials had a meeting, and the reconnaissance survey and high-intensity drills conducted by U.S. warships and aircraft near China were highly likely to cause misjudgment, jeopardizing China's sovereignty and military security, the PLA Navy said, wrapping up a 2-day China-U.S. working group meeting on maritime security. The PLA Navy said, quote, "In this regard, the Chinese military will continue to respond to all dangerous and provocative acts in accordance with relevant laws and regulations and resolutely safeguard national territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests," end quote. The PLA Navy said that the two sides had candid and constructive exchanges, assessed the implementation of maritime and air safety code of conduct, and discussed ways to improve maritime military security. So we've seen in recent years, there was a couple incidents where, a Chinese plane would go to intercept an American plane, or I believe there was one incident where a Chinese ship crossed in front of an American ship, sending a message to the U.S., and they've really been warning against the U.S. conducting all these drills, in the South China Sea, sending ships through the Taiwan Strait, all these surveillance planes flying around near China's coast, and more warnings saying, you got to cool down here, or we're, going to keep confronting your planes and ships. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints, one from James Bovard. First, they came for the op-ed writers, one from Lord Robert Delsky, Europe's Misguided Interventions. One from Ted Snyder, New York Times blockbuster article prepares Americans for defeat in Ukraine. One from Joseph Solis Mullen, even realists overstate the China threat. One from, we kept up the same one from George O'Neill at the American Conservative, war with Iran is a path to destruction. Sorry, I've been kind of struggling with getting my words out today. It was kind of a crazy week. Just so much going on, a lot of horrific stuff to look at, and man. But anyway, again, if you can help us with our fundraiser, I appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone who has helped us. Other ways you can support this show is by liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing on social media. Follow us on social media on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. That's it for me for this week. I will be back after the weekend. I hope everybody has a good one. Thanks for listening.